Hi folks, in this video I'm going to assemble this Pinterest inspired project bag. Keep watching! So before we get started assembling this project pouch, let's take a look at what we're going to need. I'm using a 16-inch zipper. You want at least 14 inches for this project. I'm going to be doing the back of my project as a patchwork quilt. So in the file I have 3 colors. Each one is 4.5-inch square and 3 squares for each color. So that's for the back. This is my fabric for my binding. I haven't assembled it into one long strip yet, but you want at least 58 inches to wrap nicely around and not to struggle with the end. You have one piece 13.5 by 5. This is going to be folded over, and this is going to be the top of your zipper. You have one piece 13.5 by 3. Again, this is going to be folded and folded again to make the bottom half of your zipper. And this is 13.5 by 2.5, and this is going to be down at the bottom of your project bag. So we have those 3 pieces. They're all in your project file. Put those aside. I've cut my vinyl 13.5 by 10. This is 4 gauge vinyl. You can use also 8 gauge. Any vinyl that you have that's thick enough that won't tear when you put things in the bag. And this piece you'll need to cut by hand. This is the inside of the bag. It will be 15 by 15, and your batting or infusible fleece or whatever it is that you want to use, also cut 15 by 15. We cut it larger than the finished bag so that when you're quilting, you have room for it to move or shift and not ruin your bag. You don't want to run short on the edges. So I'm going to get started by assembling the pieces for the back of the bag. So the first thing I'm going to do is assemble my patchwork quilt for the back. If you want to do this in a solid piece, I would cut it 13.5 by 13.5, a large square. I would quilt it and then trim it back to whatever size I want it to be. There we go. Put that here. Okay, so I'm going to sew my 3 rows, press my seams, and then sew the top to the middle and the bottom to the middle. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll be back to show you what my back panel looks like. Okay, so you can see my little mini quilt that's going to be the back of my pouch. I've pressed all my seams and nested all my corners to make sure it looks nice and neat. So we're going to take our large 15 by 15 panel with the batting and flip it over. And I'm going to add this to the center. I won't worry about trimming my block first because after I quilt this, I will trim up all the sides so they're perfectly nice and neat. I'm just going to add a few pins to make sure that it doesn't shift while I'm quilting. I think on this one I might just do double straight lines across the seams or alongside the seams. Put a few pins in here to keep it nice and straight. It's a small piece. I'm not even sure that you need to pin it, but I think it's a good idea to make sure it doesn't shift. So after assembling these 4.5-inch squares, this piece is about 12 1/4, which gives me room to trim it and have a nice 12 by 12 finish. There we go. Just make sure the back hasn't shifted, or this will be the inside of the bag. So make sure that hasn't shifted. So I'm going to change my machine foot to a walking foot, and I'm going to get that quilting done, and I'll be back. We'll trim it up and we'll get ready to assemble the vinyl front. So I've just done a quick quilting on this. You can see through to the other side, and now we're going to trim it up nice and straight. Start by one side, make sure my ruler is nice and straight when I start to trim. That looks good. And we'll take off any excess. Go. Looks good. And one more. Okay, so now we have a nice square. It's about 12 inches, 12 1/2 inches. It's a perfect size for this pouch. This will be the inside, that will be the back, and we'll set that aside. And we'll move on to the next step, which is our zipper. Okay, so in the beginning I showed you these pieces. This was 13 1/2 by 5 inches. You want to press it in half. That's going to be at the top of the zipper. Then we have 13 1/2 by 3 inches. So you want to press about a 1/2 inch. It doesn't have to be exact. About a 1/2 inch on each side, and then fold it in half and press again. This is going to be the bottom of the zipper, and this is where your vinyl is going to slip in, so on the inside and the out you'll have a nice clean finish. This is the 13 1/2 by 2 1/2. You're just going to press in half, and this is going to be down at the bottom of the vinyl, but we don't need that yet, so we'll just set it aside. Okay, I'm going to place my zipper opening from left to right. This is my top piece with the raw edge facing to the top. And this will go on this side with the open facing towards the bottom. So I'm just going to switch over to my zipper foot, and I'm going to top stitch right along both pieces, and I'll be back to show you the next step, attaching the vinyl. I should have mentioned before closing that I cut a piece of tissue paper from the roll that my vinyl came on, and I'm just going to put this underneath so that the vinyl won't stick to the surface of my sewing machine. If you're going to use a clip, use it close to the edge so that you don't damage your vinyl. If it's close to the edge no matter, because we're going to be trimming and putting a binding on it anyway. But this way the vinyl will slide on your machine instead of sticking and giving you problems when you're trying to attach it. So that's just a little hint if you've never sewn vinyl before. So here we go. We've top stitched the vinyl in, and you can see by folding that piece of fabric we don't have any nasty edges on the inside or the outside. So now I want to measure up and see how this fits. It's a little too long, so I think I'm just going to clamp it in place. There we go. And I'm going to trim this excess vinyl off the bottom. I'll just line it up nice and straight. There we go. And we'll trim that off. Okay. Set that aside, and once again I'm just going to add this piece to the bottom, the raw edge facing down. No need to worry about folding it in because you are going to have a binding, so none of the raw edge is going to be visible. We'll just, actually I think I'll use a pin because we won't see it anyway. Just stick a pin in there. Make sure it's nice and straight. Put another pin in. Okay, I'm going to sew right along this top edge. I'm not going to worry about the bottom edge because that is going to be caught up in the binding. And once again, I'm going to add the tissue paper so that the vinyl will slide easily on my machine. Just make sure I don't have the tissue paper caught in my sewing. Although you can just tear it out, but if it's not needed there, I won't put it there. And we just want to clip close to the edge once again so we don't mark our vinyl. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and top stitch this right along the top edge, and I'll be back to show you the next step. So we have our bottom row assembled. It's onto the vinyl, nice and straight. We have it done with the top stitch. So our next step is to lay this out on our backing, and we can start to see how this is going to look. Okay, so I'm going to clip the top to make sure it doesn't move. And we'll do the same along the bottom. Okay, we're going to open our zipper. Don't forget to open your zipper. That's really, really important. And I'm going to set my stitch length at 4.5. I'm going to baste along both sides, and we'll trim off our excess once that's done. Very important, don't forget to open your zipper. You want to be sure that you did that. Maybe I'll even stick a pin in it to make sure this doesn't move. That together, and we'll just baste along both sides, not the top and bottom, just both sides, and I'll be back to show it to you. And we're back. So I've basted using a 4.5 stitch length down both sides, and when I did this I also put tissue paper. I should have mentioned before that I also put tissue paper over the vinyl so it would slide easily under my presser foot. We're going to turn it upside down, and you could see that I did shift it a little when I was sewing, so I'm going to trim everything back up straight and take off this excess. We also want to trim down our seam allowance on the sides because we're going to be installing our binding too. So let's get that all trimmed up. Nice and straight. That looks good. Take that away. And let's trim up our seam allowance a little bit too, so it's not as bulky under the binding. There we go. Just move that out of the way. I'm going to straighten out the top that I did a little crooked. See, I have my zipper in the way. That up. That looks better. We'll trim down this side. You probably want to make sure that the rotary blade that you're using is an older one to cut through your zipper, because you're probably going to dull the blade, or use scissors that you have set aside for doing things like that. And we'll clean up the bottom edge. There we go. All nice and neat. Okay, so that's the back and the front of our pouch. So all we have left to do is install our binding. Let me get this out of the way. Okay, I've prepared my binding by sewing all my pieces together on the diagonal. This is a technique I learned from Jenny Doan from Missouri Star Quilt. I will again add the link for her binding video to my post in case anyone wants to follow it. And as she does, she always leaves a little excess at the bottom so that when you come all the way around, it's easier to join together. I'm just going to clip this. Go to here. And I'm going to install the binding. So I'll get all that done and I'll be back to show you the finished pouch. So here we are, all done. I've just done my binding super fast on the machine. I didn't pay attention to finishing my edges nicely or anything. I just wanted to get it done for the video so you can see how cute it turned out. You have a zipper open. We can store our projects in there and take them on the go, or keep our tools in there, whatever you like. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I will post the link for this design space file in my project post in the sewing group. You can find a link for the sewing group in the description under this video. If you make any, please post pictures. We'd love to see them. Thank you for watching.